Hi, Michelle Glass here. Welcome back to another episode in our Chapter 28 lecture series. Our topic for this video is female sex function, as well as topics such as contraception and infertility. Now, for females, sexual arousal and orgasm is very similar to what we see happening in males. So sexual arousal can be started by genital stimulation or erotic thoughts, and that will signal the parasympathetic stimulation, which will trigger the release of nitric oxide, relaxing arteries, causing engorgement of the erectile tissue in both the clitoris and the bulb of vestibule. Continued stimulation is going to increase the secretion from cervical and vestibular glands, as well as increase blood flow to this area, causing fluid to cross into the vestibule from underlying connective tissue so that the area gets very wet. Continued rhythmic contact of the penis with the clitoris and the vaginal walls will trigger the orgasm, which is basically peristaltic contractions of the uterine and vaginal walls, as well as the bulbospongiosis and ischiocavernosus muscles. Now, in females, there's not the refractory period the same way there is in males, so females can have multiple orgasms pretty short together in time. Contraception is referring to control of fertility or pregnancy, and there are several different contraception methods. They're not detailed in a lot of detail in our textbook, so just kind of a broad overview. One method is described as the rhythm method, and this is where you time intercourse based on fertility. So if you're trying to prevent pregnancy, then you limit intercourse to timeframes when the female is not fertile. And if you are trying to achieve pregnancy, then you're going to increase your intercourse around her fertile window. In order for rhythm method to work well, female has to be very familiar with her body, and you look at signals such as a decreased temperature and increase in LH levels, which triggers or indicates ovulation. Barrier methods such as condoms or diaphragms are used to prevent the contact between sperm and egg. Chemical methods are usually just centered around the female, and these are things like the birth control pill, and there's other ways of administering these different hormones to prevent ovulation. Surgical techniques would be pretty much clipping, cutting, and cauterizing either a uterine tube in female or the seminiferous tubule, or the the ductus deferens or vas deferens in males. Surgical methods are also preventing the contact of sperm and egg, but this is going to be a permanent sort of sterilization technique. In this case, in males, you're preventing sperm from being part of the ejaculate, and in the case of females, she's still ovulating, but that secondary oocyte is just released into the pelvic cavity and should not be able to enter the uterine tube, and so the body just degenerates that particular cell. The last example here is an intrauterine device. So this is something that is actually implanted into the uterine lining, and this prevents implantation of a possible embryo. Now there's a couple different styles that are on the market in the US. One is the Mirena Device, and this device not only implants into the uterine lining, but it also does release some hormones. So it's doing both a chemical method and then the implantation method. And then there's a second style that I believe is copper-based, and that one is not releasing the hormone with it. It's just implanted into the uterine wall, preventing implantation of an embryo. Now, as we look at these different contraception methods, they vary in their effectiveness. Obviously, the most effective way to prevent pregnancy is to abstain from sexual intercourse. Obviously, that's preventing contact between the sperm and the egg. When we talk about sexually transmitted infections, abstinence and use of condoms are going to be good ways of preventing mixing of body fluids, which is going to offer protection. So a lot of these other techniques might be effective at reducing risk of pregnancy, but may or may not have any impact on sexually transmitted infections. The last thing to talk about briefly is infertility, which can occur either in the male or the female. In males, we typically see it tied to a low sperm count or sperm that are not very motile. So in either case, they're having trouble actually making it into the uterine tube in order to be present to fertilize a possible secondary oocyte. Or you can see sperm that are malformed. And so in this case, either they're not able to make it to the uterine tube, or they may just not be able to produce a viable zygote. In females, it is, of course, more complicated because we're looking at she needs to have functional ovaries as well as a functional uterus. She needs to have fully functional ovarian and uterine cycles that are coordinated together. So any factors that might interfere with this, either the ovaries, the uterus, or those hormone cycles, can cause infertility. Amenorrhea is the term that's used when female is lacking a uterine or menstrual cycle. And this can either be a primary cause, so maybe damage to the ovaries, or maybe she's lacking a uterus or having significant hormone malfunctions. Or you can have a secondary amenorrhea, which is, typically brought on by maybe emotional stress or malnutrition, or not having enough lipid reserves can also trigger this. Now, a reduction in lipid reserves might be because an individual is starving. It might be because she is, starving herself because of an eating disorder such as anorexia, but it could also be caused by a super extreme athlete, a marathon runner, who's not maintaining enough lipid reserves in her body to continue having her menstrual cycle. Okay, so stay tuned.